All right, I'm with Erin Gray in Perth, known for her role as Colonel Wilma Deering in Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Erin, thank you very much for your time and welcome to Perth.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
Now, you've been to Australia before, but this is your first visit to Perth, am I
First time to
correct?
Perth, yes. I was here many years ago doing the Logie Awards, and then I shot a film up in Paradise Cove, which I spent a month there, which was fabulous. And I've been to Melbourne and Brisbane, but this is the first time, here.
Now, I was a fan of the original Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Can you believe that was 35 years ago that that series was made? You're still looking great, by the way.
Well, thank you for putting that in. No, it's hard for me to believe because I still think I'm 30, so... No, it's amazing to me.
I'm hoping that they bring out like a 35th anniversary edition box set or something like that.
Oh, that would be a great idea. Yeah, it's funny. Just a side story about 30 years. I met a psychic before I got into acting, and asked him whether I would be successful as an actor. And he said, yes. He said, you will do something of a different time period. And he said, I don't know if it's the future or the past. He said, you will sign a contract, and the first letter of the contract is going to be the letter M. And you're going to argue with the producers about the color of your hair. And 30 years later, you're going to still be signing your name over and over and over again. And I had no idea what that meant. But I remember when I got Buck Rogers, I immediately checked my contract. And I didn't see the letter M, so I dismissed it. And then a year later, I'm arguing with the producer about the color of my hair, and I'm going, oh my goodness. So I ran home and I looked at my contract, and on the corner of the contract was MCA Universal, and there was that M, because I'd looked at the bulk of it rather than looking at the logo. And 30 years later, I'm signing my name a lot. So it's one of those interesting things. You're going, how is that possible? Makes you wonder about other things in life and what we don't know or can figure out
Well, one of my questions was, how did you get the role as Colonel Wilma Deering? So,
Well, actually,
psychic.
but the psychic didn't get me the role. I ended up, after meeting with him, and it took me a couple of years to leave the modeling industry and move back to Los Angeles and see what I could do. And I went under contract to Universal Studios at the time because I realized at the ancient age of 28 that I had no credits other than hundreds of TV commercials, which didn't cut it in Hollywood, and that I needed to get some credits. And so I figured if I went under contract, Universal would put me to work, and then I could build my resume and my experience, which was not really the best idea. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But I ended up getting a 4-hour miniseries called Evening in Byzantium, and that kind of happened again in a very bizarre way. I had been told I didn't get the part after auditioning, and then 8:30 at night after I'd crying, I just remember crying in my spaghetti. It's just because I was stirring the sauce and going, I didn't get the part. And the phone rings, and suddenly, you have to be in Santa Barbara on Monday. You have the part. I'm going, what happened? But again, another story. But so after I did the 4-hour miniseries, the last day of the shoot was 6 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning, and I was so tired because we'd been working nonstop, and all I could think about was going home, take a shower, go to bed, just relax. And the studio called me up and said, no, you have to be at the studio to screen test for this project called Buck Rogers. And I didn't want to do it. I said, no, I'm tired. I just want to take a shower. You don't understand. I haven't slept. And they know you got to be there. And I was really in a bad mood. I don't like being forced into something, but I'm under contract. So I go in, and there are all these other starlets around going, hi, I want to be Colonel Wilma Deering. Hire me. And I'm like, can we get this over with? Okay. I mean, and I think Gil took it as a personal challenge. If you have a chance to meet him, he's Mr. Charming, and he loves to flirt with the ladies, and he loves to get people to smile, and he's constantly telling jokes. Matter of fact, he can't help himself. It's like a twitch with him. But anyway, so the more I was kind of just like biding my time and sort of being a little annoyed, he found that challenging, and he kept trying to tease me. And the more he did it, the more sullen I got, And I just sort of didn't really care about my performance. I just stayed with that in character through the screen test. And that's what got me the part because I didn't have that, oh, please hire me kind of attitude. It was like, just let me get home. You have no idea. You have no right to hold me this long. I have not slept in 24 hours. So anyway, so that's how I got the part. And then when I did the movie, which was a great experience, but it had started out with, for me, they had told me it was going to be a 10-hour miniseries. And then suddenly we were doing a feature film. And so after we did the feature film, I was like, I'm just going to go on and do other projects. And they wanted me to do the series, and I turned it down over and over and over again. And unfortunately, I do make stupid mistakes in my life, and I'm glad I didn't win in this situation, but I didn't know the impact that my character would have on an entire generation of women and men. But finally, I went off to do, I think, a television episodic role, and they've been looking for a replacement for me, and the head of NBC saw my episode, and I was back to being a brunette, and he said, "That's the girl." And they said, "Well, that is the girl who did Colonel Wilma Deering." He said, "Well, get her." I should have, if I had known that, I would have renegotiated, but I didn't know that. So, no, yeah.
Something I also read probably several years ago that they made a Buck Rogers like in the 1930s or something like that. So, and you never had seen it. Have you got a chance to ever see that?
Hadn't seen it, didn't know anything about Buck Rogers. I mean, I loved comic books, but my comic books were all the classic romantic, Rapunzel and, the prince and the fairy, in the castles and that sort of thing. And that's what I was interested in. So I didn't know anything about the legacy of Buck Rogers at all. So again, it was, but, I think I was meant to play the part based on the psychic. And I also found out, a fan told me one day, he said, Buck Rogers, the comic strip came out on January 7th, which is my birthday. So again, if one believes in afterlife or, how we pick our lives or whatever, maybe that was a way of my going, wink, wink, this is what you're going to be doing. I don't know.
It was meant to be. Now, I loved the first season. But when I got to the second, I liked it, but not as much as the first. Now, I, as a fan, and I wanted to see more of you, but is it just me that I was seeing less and less of you and less lines, but you were in every episode, but little bits.
And not really a commanding character, and no longer fighting in my fighter jet, and being more, I hope Buck will save us or get here in time, whatever. Actually, when we got the new producer, he wanted to put his stamp on the show. He wanted to change the look of the show. I don't know why. It was doing very well. But he, I think, brought his ego into the mix, basically, and wanted to recreate Buck Rogers, which he did. And he didn't want to bring me back. And I kept saying, I said, I guess you're not reading my fan mail, are you? Really? And you want to change my wardrobe? If I did come back, then it was wanting to change that, which reminded me of Dairy Queen in space, with my little skirt and my little cap and whatever. I just needed some roller skates and a tray,
Yeah, it was like I don't know, was it just me again? But they were trying to sort of copy parts of Galactica or Star Trek or something like that. It was just, I don't know, it was just completely different from the first season.
Very different and very disappointing. I think we felt it, we knew it, and we felt that we weren't going to last much longer.
Is that the reason why you think it didn't last?
I think that might be part of it. I think the other part of it is we were in a very expensive show to produce because we didn't have computers in those days, and we didn't have all the special effects that are much easier to do. And we had a team working around the clock, and they were constantly fighting to get the special effects done in time. And so the cost of that, the timing of it, and the fact that I think a lot of the fans were disappointed. They wouldn't quite have as big a number as we had the first year. And I think the other thing is a lot of people weren't taking into effect the fact that there was a new thing called cable. And so there were some of the audience was just naturally going to these other options that were suddenly became available instead of just having the 3 network stations at the time. So a combination of things, it's just a shame.
There's also been rumours in the past, not so much today, but of remake, like they've done with Battlestar Galactica. Yeah. I'd love to see a remake, but have you heard any word of that?
No, well, let's put it this way. The executive producer of Batman, Michael Uslan, is a dear friend, and it's a dream project of his, and he's really tried very hard to get it done, but he said, between the agents and the lawyers in town, it just wasn't happening. And I think it's really a shame because this is a man who really loves his comic books. He really knows how to tell a story, and he really knows how to produce and get something done right. And I think it's a real shame that he didn't have that opportunity. Maybe he'll come back again, and maybe that he'll rethink it or try again. I hope so, because he's certainly the person that I would want to have be the producer of it. And I don't know. I'm also kind of hoping that maybe the timing is right, that who owns the rights right now might be wanting to pass it on to his kids, the legacy of it. I would hate to see it end, because it has gone through a couple of generations of families and fans, and wouldn't it be nice to keep it going?
But also, like Galactica, Richard Hatch appeared on the new remake, so obviously there's room and possibilities for you and Gil to appear.
Yes, that's true. But I have to say, regarding Richard Hatch, have you met him?
No,
Okay, he's an amazing person, and I think he is personally the person responsible for keeping Battlestar Galactica alive all these years, because he was the one that was constantly at all the conventions talking about Battlestar Galactica over and over and over again, keeping that image, that franchise alive, and I think it's so appropriate that the executive producer wrote him into it. It would have been sad if they hadn't, because he just brings so much to the project. So yes, I would love to be part of it. Maybe this time they'll make me, the president.
Well, it's possible. We got to start it.
Or something like that.
We've got to start a social media campaign and get it happening. I think
that would be awesome. Please do that. It'd mean a lot to me. Yeah.
Now,
and to the fans, not just to me.
Yes, of course, me as well. Now, you had a guest spot on a show called Hollywood Treasure, and you thought you had, which I'm shocked that you didn't. Apparently, it didn't go as well as what you thought. You had.
Well, let me explain to you the whole situation. I was at San Diego Comic-Con, and I have a company called Heroes for Hire, and I represent a lot of actors, and so I was busy getting my actors in place and setting them up with their banners and whatever. And so suddenly, the next thing I know, this person has a mic in my face and saying, "You want to be on our show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, fine, no problem." And next thing I know, I'm on this reality show, which I didn't know. I thought it was just going to be an interview. And so they said, they asked me if I had any memorabilia from Buck Rogers and so on. I said, "No, I don't have anything." And I went, "Oh, wait a minute. I do have my Starfighter model." And the guys just lit up, and I'm going, "Why is that? Is that good?" And they went, "Is it the hero model? I mean, is it like the original?" I said, "Well, the guys from Heartland gave it to me." And he said, and I said, "Why? I mean, why are you getting so excited?" And he said, "Well, I mean, what is it worth?" And he said, "About $60,000. And I went, "You mean I could put my daughter through college? Are you kidding? With this Starfighter?" And then I said, and they said, "Yeah, it's in mint condition." I went, "Well, yeah." "Oh, no." When they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, see, I took my model and I put it up on my bookcase, and the bookcase, there's a heating and air conditioning vent, and I didn't take it down for a number of years, and when I did take it down, it seems that the heating vent had melted the outside of the model." So I said, I kind of look at it as, Colonel Wilma survived going through an asteroid, gunfight in air, and it's got character, So they said, "Well, let's see if we can get it fixed." And so they brought in the Star Trek and Star Wars model makers to see if they could fix it. And unfortunately, they said, "No, but we kind of like it just the way it is." And we couldn't recreate what she's done. It's taken 30 years of a slow melt to get it to look like this. And it's not that bad. It's just kind of ripply and a little, just a tiny bit. Gil his is in mint condition, and it's been in a beautiful box, and so his
That's
is
the way to
perfect.
keep them then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I've asked you a lot about Buck Rogers, but I'm sorry to say I didn't see much of Silver Spoons, but you're in a lot of that. So tell us, do you get asked a lot of questions about Silver Spoons or any other shows that you've done? Because you have been in a lot.
Yeah. A lot of people remember Silver Spoons. I don't get too many questions. Most everyone talks about Buck Rogers. That or J. Digger Doyle on Magnum P.I. That seems to be the two things.
What about Baywatch?
Not too much. I didn't have that much of a role on it. Again, they put me in a uniform. I played a boss. I don't know what it was, but I always was playing this leader character. I was always in one uniform after another, which I thought was very interesting. But I really, for me personally, my personal experience on Silver Spoons was much more pleasurable. I loved doing the character on Buck Rogers, but at the time I had a baby at home, and working from 6 in the morning to 9:30 at night, I never saw my child, and it really started to just tear me apart. It was really hard for me. But when I did Silver Spoons, it was a sitcom, so it was live performances in front of a live audience. So we spent the first 4 days rehearsing. And since Ricky was in school, I didn't go to work till noon until he was ready to finish his schoolwork. And then most of my scenes were with Joel. So Joel and I would do our scenes. Ricky would come in and I'd maybe do one scene with Ricky, and then I was gone. So I'd pick up my son from school. I'd make every little league game. I went on to all the school projects and whatever. And so for me, that was a very satisfying. I could be an actress and star in something and still be a mom. And those 5 years were probably the best 5 years of my life in that sense.
Going back to Buck Rogers for a moment, did you have a favourite episode? I'm guessing it's from the first season, but is there a standard episode for you that you remember?
Oh, yes, the Bourbon, Space Vampires, I think it was called. Absolutely. It's the only episode where the storyline goes through my character. So if you look at all of them, it's my storyline, and I go from being nice and evil. And it was just fun to really sort of sink my teeth. It was the really only episode where I really felt that I had scenes where I could, get into it and have some fun. And I had a great director who really supported me and really helped me feel confident and to take chances and whatever. And that was Larry Stewart, and he was a wonderful man. And yeah, I was very blessed. Everything came together on that one.
And you have a new movie coming out soon. It's called Christmas in Palm Springs. So tell us about that. A director that I worked with called me up. Matter of fact, he was the director who, Fred Ray, who was also going to, or did direct the possible prequel that I did on Buck Rogers, which was going to be a webisode series. Then he called me up and said, "Erin, would you like to play the mayor of Palm Springs?" I'm like, "Sure, Fred, whatever." So it was fun because I got to work with Dina Meyer, who's a client of mine as well. So it was really great to work with her. And it was just a fun romantic comedy kind of film. And I actually lived in Palm Springs, so it was kind of cool to come back and play the mayor of Palm Springs. So yeah, it was very enjoyable. We're looking forward to that as well. But you spoke about your company before, but you also teach Tai Chi.
Yes, that's my passion, is Tai Chi, yes.
How long have you been doing that for?
Tai Chi for 30 years. Yeah. It all started when I'm a person who's very hungry for knowledge. I'm always reading books, and that's my passion. And whenever I'm interested in something, I'm just constantly studying and reading and learning new things. And in the early 70s, when Richard Nixon went to China, the lead story in the newspaper was not so much how he was opening the doors to China, but it was more about the journalist who traveled with him, ended up having an appendicitis attack, and he ended up having surgery. And he was amazed that they didn't give him any drugs, that it was all these needles in his body. And so that was my first introduction to acupuncture. And I thought, my goodness, there's this wonderful other way of healing people that we in the West know nothing about. So I was very fascinated by this. And then years later, I did Rockford Files with James Garner. And James, he's a handsome leading man, and I wanted to have lunch with him, and he kept disappearing at lunch. So I cornered him one day, like, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Well, the only way I can survive doing a series, because I've got a bum knee that I hurt in a stunt, and in Western medicine can't fix it, and I'm in pain all the time, but I got to jump over cars and leap over hedges and whatever, and being on a series is very exhausting. So I see my acupuncturist every day." And I went, "Acupuncture? Tell me more about acupuncture." So I really started grilling him. He said, "Well, why don't you just go and see for yourself?" So I went to the acupuncture, and I had good results in that I felt afterwards very rested, very clear of mind, ready to take on challenges. So I felt good, but I didn't necessarily buy into it completely. But I would go in for like little tune-ups, like, well, it always makes me feel good, so I'll just go in and. And then one day when I was doing Silver Spoons, they had written an episode for me because they knew that I wanted to sing and dance. I can dance, but I really have a hard time singing. But I studied a lot, and finally they wrote an episode for me. And the day before I was to perform, I had the worst head cold of my life, just the worst. And it was like this cement block in my head. And it's the only time that I've been asked to go home and come back the next day when they wanted to film, and they wanted me to rest up. And instead of going home, I went to my acupuncture. I said, "You have to heal me. You have no idea. I've studied singing for 20 years. This is my chance to finally sing. So I must be healthy." And so 3 hours later, he sort of twiddled a needle in my third eye area, and all of a sudden, this energy just shot through my head, through my body, all the way down to my toes. And I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" He said, "Oh, you all better now." And I was. And I got off that table, my cheeks were rosy, my eyes were bright, I felt great. I went back to the studio and everybody going, "What drug are you on? We want some." I went, "No, I'm not, I don't do that, you know." And I went on to perform for the network, and the next day I thought, oh, okay, the next day I'm going to wake up, the cold's going to be back. No. I was completely healed. And so I found myself like questioning this doctor, how does Chinese medicine work? Why? And he said to me one day, he said, acting is very dangerous to your health. I said, excuse me? This is my livelihood. What are you talking about? It's dangerous to my health. He said, when you do these emotions, the body doesn't know that they're not real. And your emotions affect certain organs of your body. So grief and loss is your lungs and large intestines, and worry is your stomach, spleen, and fear is your kidney and bladder, and went on and on. I'm like, okay, so it's kind of started to make sense to me, because as an actor, I go to work and I'm in a great mood, go to work, but my job that day is to scream and yell at somebody and cry tears, and not just once, but maybe 100 takes, you know, because there's close-ups and over-the-shoulder shots, and it goes on and on and on and on, and all during that time, these emotions are real. I have to create that honesty in my performance, but my body doesn't know they're not real. And so, you know, you should ask Dee Wallace Stone at one point. She threw out her adrenal system playing in the part in Cujo. She was in fear for 6 weeks, and her adrenal system didn't work for many years. She finally healed herself, but it took a long time. So it made sense to me. The more I learned about this, the flow of energy in the body and how it has to be balanced, and we have to rejuvenate ourselves and so on. And I think a lot of times why actors get into drugs and things like that is because they're, you know, a pill to go to sleep and something to make you wake up even more and take on the long days, and then the shifting of the biorhythms, you know, you're working nights, you're working days, you're working on one planet then the other and so on, and it really messes you up. And I mean, for example, you know, Farrah Fawcett did Extremities on Broadway, and, you know, she was beaten and raped every day. I'm sorry, that's gonna do something to you. So, my acupuncturist said to me one day, he says, "You do Tai Chi, does the same thing as my needles." I said, "Excuse me? You mean I don't have to spend $150 an hour and fill out insurance forms? I can learn to do this series of movements and that will keep me healthy?" He says, "Yeah." And so I started studying it. I wouldn't give up my Western exercise. And for a long time, I still liked to train for marathons and all that sort of thing. And then one day I had pneumonia. And I'm going, I don't want to be sick anymore. I know how to avoid this. And I made a commitment to Tai Chi and Qigong at that time. And I avoided colds and sicknesses for 20 years. I got my first cold in February. I was so mad at myself because I knew I'd overdone it, and I knew where I'd messed up. But yeah, so.
No worries. And just finally, is there anything else we can look forward to with Erin Gray?
Gee, I don't know. The best is yet to come.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, again, thank you very much for your time on 6PR, and we hope you're having a great time in Perth, and I know there's other fans ready to see you now. Again, thanks again for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.